I was standing outside my father's house on Christmas Eve, watching him through the frosted window as he laughed, toasted a glass of bourbon, and handed my brother a beautifully wrapped gift, while pretending I didn't exist. My truck was parked right at the end of the driveway, headlights off, engine silent. I had driven 2 hours in the snow on nothing but hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the text message I received was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Inside my family, my father, my stepmother, my brother Evan, and even a few neighbors sat around the dinner table under warm yellow lights. A roasted ham, mashed potatoes, casseroles, everything. My father was carving the ham with the same old wooden-handled knife my mother used to love, but there was no extra plate set, no empty chair waiting, no sign that anyone in that house remembered they had another child. Me. The daughter who spent Christmases past deployed overseas. The daughter who sent money home when Dad lost his job. The daughter who paid for Evan's rehab twice. The daughter who showed up every time she was asked until tonight when she wasn't wanted. Now let me tell you exactly how this all began. 3 days earlier, I had woken up before sunrise to a group text from Dad: Christmas dinner is family only this year. Everyone already knows the plan. Everyone except me. There was no follow-up text, no explanation, just silence. At first I thought maybe he meant something else. Maybe he worded it wrong. Maybe he was having one of those grumpy mornings he sometimes had since Mom passed. So I called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. By afternoon I finally got a one-line reply. Don't make this difficult, Olivia. We've already discussed it. Except, we hadn't discussed anything. Not a word. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. I typed back, Dad discussed what I'm flying home on the 23rd. He didn't reply. I waited all day, nothing. That night my stepmother Linda finally texted, this year is intimate family only. It's better if you sit this one out. Don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. Those 4 words haunted me. They sliced like a razor. I tried to understand how my own father could decide that Christmas, something sacred to Americans of his generation, was better without his daughter. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they thought I'd be too tired from my law classes. Maybe Evan had planned something special. Maybe they wanted a small gathering. But none of it felt right. Because underneath everything, under every excuse I tried to invent for them, I knew the truth. My father didn't think I belonged anymore. The closer Christmas came, the more restless I felt. I could hear my mother's voice in my mind. She used to say, live family breaks your heart sometimes, but you keep showing up. That's what love looks like. So I showed up. The snowstorm wasn't too bad, just swirling flakes and a stiff December wind that cut across the Colorado plains. I drove the familiar route home, passing the old grain silos and the church where Mom's funeral was held. Every mile felt heavier. Every mile I rehearsed how Dad would open the door, realize he'd made a mistake, hug me and laugh about the misunderstanding. But when I parked and walked toward the house, I didn't see surprise or guilt in his eyes. I didn't see recognition at all. I wasn't even a shadow on his conscience. He lifted a glass toward Evan as if giving a toast. Evan laughed, his head thrown back. Dad clapped him on the shoulder, proud, present, warm. And that's when it hit me. So hard I had to steady myself on the railing. He chose this. He deliberately chose a Christmas without me. I could have knocked. I could have walked in and forced the issue. But something deep in my chest cracked quietly, cleanly, like a bone finally giving way after years of pressure. I turned, walked back to my truck, and sat behind the wheel in complete stillness. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the house, the soft glow of its lights blurred behind snowflakes drifting past the windshield. I whispered, okay, if you don't want me there, I won't be there. I drove to a little diner off Highway 84, the one with the Christmas lights that flicker unevenly. I sat at the counter, ordered a slice of pecan pie and black coffee, and watched families come in, kids noisy with excitement, grandparents bundled in scarves, couples carrying presents. The world felt warm for everyone else. That was the moment, sitting in that booth with a slice of pie I couldn't finish, that I made a quiet decision, one that would change the next chapter of my life completely. If my father didn't want me in his home, I would build a home of my own. A place where no one could exclude me. A place where no one could decide I didn't belong. a place that belonged entirely unquestionably to me. That night, I opened my laptop and typed a search I never expected to type: Montana ranch properties for sale. And that is where everything truly began. The flight to Montana was cheap and cramped, but as I watched the snow-covered mountains pass beneath the wing, one word kept coming to mind: possibility. A week earlier, I'd been in a lonely diner on Christmas Eve, pretending pecan pie could fill the space my family left empty. Now I was on a one-way flight north because if my father didn't want me at his table, I was going to build my own. I'd spent nights scrolling property listings, foreclosed ranches, bank-owned homes, places that needed work. I wasn't looking for perfect. I was looking for something that couldn't be taken away from me with a text message. The real estate agent who met me at the tiny airport was a woman in her 60s named Carol. Gray hair, strong handshake, the kind of steady look you get from someone who's spent a lifetime dealing with weather banks and people. "You must be Olivia," she said. "You sounded serious on the phone. Most folks say they're thinking about buying land. You sounded like you'd already decided." "I have," I said. "I'm not here to browse." She gave a small approving nod. "Good. It's too cold to waste time on people who just want to take pictures for social media." We drove out of town past modest homes and old grain elevators, then into open country, just fields, pines, and sky. Carol talked about winters, wells, fence lines, and neighbors who showed up with a plow when your truck wouldn't start. "You got family up here?" she asked after a while. "Not really," I said. "I'm just looking for a place to put down my own kind of roots." She glanced at me but didn't pry. Older folks have a talent for recognizing pain and giving it space. We turned down a long gravel driveway with a crooked mailbox and a faded board on the fence that read, "Carter Ridge Ranch, Ested in 1974. "Carter," I murmured. "You didn't mention that." Carol smiled. "You said that was your last name. I figured maybe it was a sign." The house wasn't fancy. One-story wide porch, old swing roof that needed patching. A weathered barn leaned a little like an old veteran who was still standing but tired. The kind of place most young people scroll past. For me, it felt like a deep breath. "It was foreclosed a couple years back," Carol said. "Family fell on hard times. Bank's been sitting on it. 40 acres, some timber, water rights. Needs work, but the bones are good." I stepped out of the car. The cold air cut straight through my coat, but it smelled clean pine snow, distant wood smoke. No traffic, no neighbor's TV. Just wind, the creak of the swing, and my own breathing. Inside the house smelled like dust and old wood. Scuffed floors, worn cabinets, faded wallpaper. But the living room had a wide stone fireplace, and there was a big window over the kitchen sink that looked out over an open field and a line of dark trees. I stood at that window and pictured something I'd never really had: holidays where I didn't have to wait to see if I was invited. A tree because I chose to put it up. A pot of stew on the stove. Maybe a dog asleep in the corner. Quiet, not emptiness, just quiet. No dad making backhanded jokes about my service. No brother sulking about how hard his life was. Just a place where I could exist without apologizing. "I'll take it," I said. Carol blinked. "You don't want to think about it. At least see the bedrooms." "If the structure's sound and the well's good, I'm not walking away," I answered. "I've done enough thinking." She watched me for a moment, then nodded. "My husband came back from Vietnam and did almost the same thing she said. Bought land before he bought furniture. Said he was tired of other people deciding where he fit." "I can relate," I said. The inspections went quickly. Years of base housing and rough deployments had given me a decent eye for what would fall apart and what would hold. The foundation was solid. The roof needed some work, but not replacing, and the well water was clear. The fences were patchy, but you can fix a fence one post at a time. The price was low enough it made my eyebrows rise. "The bank just wants it gone," Carol said. "They're not sentimental people." Within a month, the papers were signed. My name, Olivia Carter, sat alone on the deed. No cosigner, no and family, just me. The first time I turned down that gravel road knowing it was mine, something shifted in my chest. I'd always had places to sleep. Barracks, apartments, spare rooms. But they were all temporary, all dependent on someone else's rules. This land answered to me. The Marine in me started building a mental checklist. The locks were old. I replaced them. I put up motion sensor lights along the driveway and near the barn. I bought a simple camera system and set one at the gate, one at the front door, one watching the back field. Not because I was scared, just because habit is hard to unlearn. You secure your perimeter. You know who's coming. A few days later, while I was on a ladder adjusting the porch camera, a white county SUV pulled into the drive. A tall man in his late 60s got out, hat pulled, low posture, still straight despite his age. "Afternoon," he called. "You Olivia Carter?" "Yes, sir," I said, climbing down. "Something wrong?" He shook his head. "Nothing wrong. Name's Walt Hensley. I'm the sheriff around here. I like to know who's living on the old Carter place." "People keep calling it that," I said. "I don't think I'm related to those Carters." He gave me a measuring look. "You military?" "Marine Corps," I said. "Now working on the legal side." A grin creased his weathered face. "Thought so. You stand like you're waiting for someone to start a briefing. Welcome to the neighborhood Marine." "Thank you, Sheriff." He nodded toward the cameras. "Good idea. Land'll bring out the best and the worst in families. You own something folks you never hear from suddenly remember you." I gave him a small, knowing smile. I've seen a little of that already. At the time, I took his words as general wisdom. Later, they would feel like a warning I should have paid closer attention to. The next few weeks were simple in a way my life hadn't been for years. I drove to town for groceries and hardware, nodding at the same older men who gathered at the diner every morning to argue about weather and politics. I hauled junk out of the barn, patched the worst fence posts, and learned how the wind sounded when it moved through the trees at night. I went to bed sore but satisfied. No late-night texts from my father asking for money, no guilt trips, no wondering if I'd be invited to anything. Just the creak of the house settling and the quiet hum of the heater. For the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. About 3 weeks after I moved in, a piece of mail arrived with a yellow forwarding sticker. The original name on the envelope wasn't mine. Mr. Daniel Carter. I almost marked it "Return to Sender." Then the last name made me hesitate. I opened it. Inside was a short letter from a small law office and a printed email thread. The letter mentioned the foreclosure of the ranch property and your client, Mr. Evan Carter, missing the financing deadline. I read that line twice. Mr. Evan Carter. My brother's first name, my last name, linked to a failed attempt to buy the very land I was standing on. I looked out the kitchen window at the snow-covered field and the dark line of trees. I had believed I'd put hundreds of miles between myself and my family's mess. And for the first time, a cold thought slid in. What if this place wasn't as far from them as I thought? I didn't sleep much the night I found that letter, my brother's name printed on it like some ghost from my old life had slipped under my door. Evan had never shown the slightest interest in land work or anything that required commitment. The idea of him trying to buy a ranch felt like reading about a stranger. But the letter was real. The foreclosure was real. And the property he'd tried and failed to purchase was very much the one I now owned. For the next 2 days, I kept telling myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was coincidence. Carter wasn't an unusual surname. Maybe it wasn't my Evan. But the doubt lingered like a slow leak in a tire. That Friday morning, as I was clearing old boards out of the barn, my phone buzzed. When I saw the name on the screen, I froze. Dad. I hadn't heard his voice since before Christmas. My thumb hovered over the answer button, and for a full second I considered letting it ring out. But old habits die hard. I had spent years being the child who picked up, the reliable one, the one who never let a call go unanswered. I swallowed and pressed accept. "Hi, Dad." "Olivia," he said as if speaking through a frown. "You bought property." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. And the way he said property like it tasted sour made my stomach tighten. "Word travels fast," I said lightly. "Yes, I did." "Why would you do something like that?" he demanded. I stepped outside the barn, letting the crisp winter air steady me, because I wanted a place of my own. He exhaled sharply, the kind of frustrated sigh he used when bills were late or the football game was going poorly. "You should have talked to me first." That stunned me. "Talk to you, Dad, you didn't invite me to Christmas." "That's different," he snapped, "and we're not discussing that." "We absolutely are," I said. "You cut me out of a family holiday without explanation. You don't get to act confused that I made a decision about my own life." Silence, thick simmering silence. "Then fine. Whatever. But Evan needs a house. He's had a rough year, and this whole Montana thing is exactly the fresh start he deserves. I felt something cold creep along my spine. Montana thing. He cleared his throat. You know what I'm talking about. Evan was trying to buy land out there. Family land. Property that rightfully ought to stay in the Carter name. I gripped the phone harder. Dad, are you saying Evan tried to buy this ranch? Well, of course he did, Dad barked. And if you hadn't swooped in. I closed my eyes. Dad, this ranch was in foreclosure. It wasn't your land. It wasn't Evan's. It wasn't anyone's family property. It should have been, he shouted. Evan talked about that ranch for months. He said he could see a future there. He said he felt connected to it. And then you. And then what I asked quietly. Bought something he didn't qualify for. Something he couldn't finance. Something I didn't even know he wanted. Dad's voice hardened. You took what wasn't yours. The absurdity of that statement nearly made me laugh. Dad, how could I take something I didn't even know existed? I didn't buy this to spite anyone. Well, you bought it, he said, and now Evan's out of options. I rubbed my forehead pulse, quickening. Dad, Evan has always been out of options because he refuses to create any for himself. That's enough, he snapped. He's your brother. You're supposed to help him. I have helped him, I said, voice trembling with anger, more times than I can count. You just don't remember that part. He ignored that completely. Look, Olivia, just be reasonable. Sell the ranch to Evan, or sign over part of it. Something. He deserves it. No, I said, calm and absolute. Dad inhaled sharply as if I'd slapped him. No, after everything I've done for you. I nearly dropped the phone. After everything he had done, memories flickered through my mind, deployments without a single care package, birthdays forgotten, my law school tuition paid mostly by my own savings from Afghanistan. Dad, I said quietly, don't call me again unless it's to apologize. Then I hung up. I stood there for a long moment listening to the empty wind move through the bare branches. My hands were shaking. I wasn't even sure if it was anger or heartbreak. Probably both. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Walt drove by, saw me splitting kindling, and rolled down his window. You look like you're fighting the wood, not chopping it, he observed. Just a long phone call, I said. He tilted his head. Family. Unfortunately. He got out and leaned against the fence. Families are funny things. Some folks think blood gives them rights. It doesn't, especially when land's involved. I hesitated, then told him everything: the foreclosure letter, Dad's call, Evan's attempt to buy the property. Walt nodded slowly. That explained something. What? Your gate camera caught 2 people at the entrance late last night. He lifted his phone and showed me a still frame. The quality was grainy but unmistakable. Dad and Evan. I felt my stomach drop. What were they doing? Could have been looking, he said evenly. Could have been taking pictures. Could have been trying to figure out a way in. The cold now felt like it was inside my ribs. I'll patrol by a little more often, Walt said. And Olivia, make sure your locks are good. They are, I whispered. The next day, I drove into town to check county parcel records, something my legal training made second nature. When I typed my parcel number into the database, several linked documents popped up. And one of them nearly made my breath stop. A development proposal, a failed one submitted months earlier. File owner Evan Carter. He had planned to build cabins, rental units. He'd put down a deposit he couldn't maintain. He'd bragged online, apparently, that he had a land deal brewing. Dad had believed him, fully. And now in their minds I was standing in the way. I left the office with my heart pounding. I told myself Dad and Evan would cool off, that people said stupid things when angry, that nothing else would happen. But I didn't fully believe it. When I got home, I stood on my porch looking at the snow-covered land. My land, quiet, peaceful, mine. But for the first time, the silence didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a storm gathering just beyond the tree line. I woke before dawn the next morning, jolted upright by the shrill buzz of my phone motion alerts from the gate camera. At first, half asleep, I thought maybe an elk had wandered too close, or the wind had rattled a branch. But when I opened the app and the live feed loaded, my breath caught in my throat. Headlights, multiple sets, right at my gate. I scrambled out of bed, threw on boots and a jacket, and padded to the window overlooking the driveway. The eastern sky was barely turning gray, but down the long gravel road I could see silhouettes figures milling around the glow of a flashlight, the outline of a van. I zoomed in on the camera feed. Dad, Evan, my stepmother Linda. A man in a puffy coat holding a clipboard looked like a realtor, and another man kneeling by my gate with a tool bag. A locksmith. My mouth went dry. They weren't here to talk. They weren't here to visit. They were here to take something. I tapped Sheriff Walt's contact. He picked up halfway through the first ring. Sheriff Hensley. Walt, it's Olivia. They're here, my family. They brought a realtor and a locksmith. A brief silence. Is anyone trying to get past the gate? They're working on it, I said, watching the locksmith set his bag down. I'm on my way, he said immediately. Stay inside. Do not confront them alone. I won't, I said, though. A part of me wanted to storm out there and demand answers. And call Rachel, he added, your JAG friend. I hung up and dialed Rachel Monroe, Captain Monroe, now serving with JAG out of Fort Harrison. She wasn't just my mentor, she was the person who'd pushed me toward law school after I left active duty. When she answered, her voice was calm, steady, almost soothing. Olivia, take a breath. Tell me exactly what's happening. I explained in a whisper, pacing my living room, keeping my eyes on the gate camera. She didn't panic. Record everything. Do not open that gate. Sheriff Hensley will handle initial contact. I'll head that way. Rachel, this is insane, I said. They're acting like the land belongs to them. Entitlement makes people bold, she replied, but the law is on your side, trust it. Her steadiness grounded me, but my hands still trembled as I put her on speaker and watched the camera. Dad was gesturing grandly at the property, waving his arms as if giving a tour. The realtor nodded politely but looked uneasy. Linda clutched her purse strap with both hands. Evan paced like he was waiting for a reward. That's the house right there, Dad said, his voice barely audible through the feed. She's not living here. She just bought it to spite us. Spite, right. The locksmith wiped his hands and knelt at the keypad. I heard the faint metallic click of tools. Linda murmured something to Dad. He snapped, she's not even here. Linda, she's off doing whatever military people do. The locks shouldn't be a problem. I felt something hot rise behind my eyes. Anger, humiliation, disbelief. They were trying to erase me. I repositioned the camera angle. Evan pounded on the gate, shouting, Olivia, we know you left. Stop pretending you own this. I swallowed hard. My voice shook as I whispered to Rachel, he's breaking down the gate. He's really trying to take it. He can't, she said, and he won't. Walt is almost there. As if on cue, a county SUV appeared in the distance, headlights bouncing along the frost-covered road. Dad didn't notice until it slowed to a stop behind them. Walt stepped out, hat-low posture, calm but unmistakably authoritative. Morning, folks, he called. Dad stiffened. Sheriff, glad you're here. We were just trying to help my daughter. She's confused. She bought land that isn't hers. I nearly choked. Walt folded his arms. Mr. Carter, this is private property. Unless you're the deeded owner, you're trespassing. Dad scoffed. It's family property. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Walt said evenly, is the idea that you can bring a locksmith to force entry. The locksmith stood up fast. Sir, they said they had authority. They don't, Walt said. Pack up your tools. The man didn't argue. He shoved his gear into the van as fast as he could. The realtor cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, perhaps we should... Dad whirled on him. Don't you start? You said you'd list it today. I said. The realtor corrected gently. I'd look at the property, assuming the legal paperwork was clear. It appears it isn't. Walt walked closer, hand resting lightly on his belt, not threatening, just present. I need all of you to step away from the gate. Evan sneered. Or what, you'll arrest us for standing here. If you break that gate or attempt to enter the property again, Walt said, tone now unmistakably serious, I will arrest you. Dad puffed up, red blotches spreading across his cheeks. This is ridiculous. My daughter is unstable. She needs intervention, not a ranch. I actually laughed bitterly, quietly from behind my curtains. Rachel's voice whispered from my phone speaker, when you're ready, step out. Calmly. My heart pounded as I opened the front door and stepped into the cold. The crunch of snow under my boots echoed like a gunshot in the quiet morning. I walked the long gravel path toward the gate, each step steady, deliberate. When Dad finally saw me approaching, his mouth fell open like he'd seen a ghost. "Olivia," he said, voice cracking. "You thought I wasn't here," I said softly. "You thought you could take my home." He opened his mouth, closed it again. Evan mumbled, We thought you were deployed." "I'm not," I said, "and even if I were, this land would still be mine." Linda stepped forward weakly. "We were just trying to help Evan. He needs a place." "What he needs," I said calmly, "is accountability." Dad's face twisted. "You ungrateful—" "Enough," Walt cut in sharply. "This stops now." Rachel's car pulled up behind Walt's, and she walked over crisp uniform under her winter coat. Dad's eyes bulged. Who is that?" "Captain Rachel Monroe," she said. "Judge Advocate General's Corps. I'm advising Ms. Carter." Dad blinked. "Jag for what?" "This is a family matter." "No," Rachel said. "This is a legal matter, and you're in violation of property laws." The color drained from Dad's face. Evan stepped back, suddenly unsure. And for the first time in a long time I felt something shift. Not victory, not revenge, something steadier. Control. For a long moment, nobody said anything. The wind moved through the pines, the engines idled, and my breath came out in little white clouds in front of my face. I could feel my heart pounding beneath my jacket, but my voice when I finally spoke was steady. "You brought a realtor," I said to my father, "and a locksmith, to my property." Dad tried to recover his footing, his tone swinging from shock to anger like it always did. "We were trying to fix a mistake," he said. "You bought something that was meant for your brother. You knew that." I tilted my head. "No, I didn't. I never knew Evan wanted this place. I never knew you even knew it existed. I found it online like any other buyer. I paid for it with my money. I signed the deed. You shut me out of Christmas and then decided you still get to dictate where I live." His jaw worked. "Don't twist this. You always do that, Olivia. You always make yourself the victim." Behind him, Evan scoffed. "You stole it, Liv. You heard Dad. I had plans. You knew I was looking for a fresh start." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. The same man-child I'd bailed out of trouble too many times, shoulders slumped under a nice jacket he didn't pay for, eyes darting between me and our father, waiting for someone else to fix the mess. "What I know," I said quietly, "is that you missed your financing deadline. The bank took it back. It was on the open market. You didn't lose family land, Evan. You lost a bad loan." His face turned red. "You think you're so much better than us because you put on a uniform and learned some big words in law school." "That's enough," Rachel said, stepping up beside me. "Mr. Carter, your daughter is the legal owner of this property. You brought a locksmith here under false pretenses. That alone could be interpreted as attempted unlawful entry." The realtor swallowed. "I was not aware of any of that. Ms. Carter, I'm very sorry. I shouldn't even be on site without your consent." He lifted his clipboard. "Consider me gone." Dad rounded on him. "You can't just leave, we had an appointment." "What you had," the realtor replied carefully, "was a misrepresentation of ownership. I won't be part of that." He blinked at me almost apologetically, then hurried back to his car and drove away. The locksmith had already slid into his van. A moment later, dust kicked up behind him as he retreated down the road. Now it was just us, family, and the law standing between us like a quiet wall. Walt adjusted his hat. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, Mr. Evan Carter, you've been informed you do not own this ranch. You've been told to leave. If you persist in trying to enter or interfere with Ms. Carter's property, we move into criminal territory. I'd rather not do that." Linda finally found her voice. "We gave everything to our kids," she said, voice quivering. "We sacrificed. This land was supposed to help Evan get back on his feet. You didn't give me much of anything," I said, not cruelly, just stating a fact. "You forgot my birthdays. You didn't come to my boot camp graduation. You didn't visit me when I was in the hospital after that training accident. But you expect me to hand over the only place I've ever owned because you made promises you couldn't keep." Dad's face twisted. "Oh, here we go," he said. "Your service? Your sacrifice? You think you're some kind of hero? You think that means you deserve everything?" "No," I said. "I think it means I deserve the same basic respect you give my brother for doing nothing." Evan stepped closer to the gate. You've always thought you were better than us, he spat. Marching around in those uniforms. Talking down to me. Sending money like you're some savior. This place is my shot to finally prove I can do something. I stared at him. Then why didn't you do it with your own loan, your own money, your own effort? Why does your shot always require someone else to pay? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Walt cleared his throat. I've read the foreclosure file, he said. Evan, you missed 3 payment deadlines on your initial agreement. The bank gave you an extension. You still missed it. That's not your sister's fault. Dad whipped his head toward Walt. You had no right. It's all public record, Walt replied. You want to talk about rights? We can talk about rights, but you won't like how that conversation ends. Dad looked back at me, and for the first time I saw something behind the fury fear. Not just of legal consequences, but of losing something deeper: control. The ability to decide which child mattered more. You always were stubborn, he said, just like your mother. That's the nicest thing you've said about me in years, I answered. A muscle in his cheek jumped. Rachel pulled a folder from her bag and held it up. Here is a certified copy of the deed in Ms. Carter's name, she said. Here is the purchase contract, the closing documents, and the release from the bank. If any of you attempt to challenge this ownership without a legal basis, you will be opening yourselves to counterclaims and damages. Dad didn't take the folder, he just glared. And she continued, we have plenty of documentation. She gestured toward the post where my camera sat. Ms. Carter's security system recorded your arrival with a locksmith and realtor this morning. Audio and video. Evan paled. You recorded us. I lifted my phone. I record everything on my own land. That's what responsible owners do. Walt nodded approvingly. I've seen the footage. If this goes to court, none of it looks good for you. Dad shook his head, disbelief edging into panic. We're family. You wouldn't drag us into court. You brought a stranger to change my locks, I said. You tried to walk off with my house like it was a tool in your garage. Tell me again what family is supposed to look like. Linda's shoulders sagged. We didn't know it would go this far, she whispered. That's the thing, I said. You never think it'll go this far because you're used to me backing down, to me bending, to me writing another check, taking another insult, swallowing another holiday alone so you don't have to be uncomfortable. Dad exhaled white mist in the cold morning air. You're overreacting. We're just trying to fix a mistake. You're trying to fix your mistake by making it my problem, I said, and I'm done doing that. Evan's voice shook. Dad promised me this land. He said he'd help me get it. He said it was practically mine. Your father promised you something he didn't own, Rachel said. That's not how property law works. He looked at Dad, betrayed. For a split second, the golden child illusion cracked, and I saw the scared boy under the entitlement. You said he started. I said I'd take care of you, Dad shot back. And I'm trying if your sister would stop playing soldier-lawyer out here in the woods. I stopped playing years ago, I said. I've been taking care of myself. And frankly, of all of you. Silence fell again. The sun had climbed over the ridge now, throwing light across the snow. It glinted off the metal of the gate, the badges on Walt's chest, the small insignia on Rachel's collar. The world suddenly felt very clear. I took a breath and stepped closer to the fence, close enough that Dad had to look straight at me. You didn't invite me to Christmas, I said quietly. You decided I didn't belong at your table. That was your choice. But you sure felt entitled to invite yourselves to my home, my land, my future. He flinched. This gate, I said, resting my hand lightly on the metal, isn't just about property. It's about boundaries. You can't pretend I don't exist when it's convenient and then treat my life like a salvage yard when you need something. His mouth opened, then shut again. For once, he had no quick comeback. Walt checked his watch. Mr. Carter, I'm going to ask you one last time to leave this property line voluntarily. If you come back with another locksmith, another realtor, or anyone else with tools instead of good intentions, I'll be waiting. And I won't be alone. Dad looked from Walt to Rachel, then to me. There was something like calculation in his eyes, but under it I glimpsed something else: age. He suddenly looked older than his years, worn down by stubborn pride and bad decisions. We're not done, he muttered. No, I said, we're not, but from now on we deal with each other honestly, and on equal footing. Evan kicked at the dirt. This isn't fair, he mumbled. It's the first fair thing that's happened in a long time, I answered. At last Dad turned away. Linda followed, dabbing her eyes. Evan lingered a moment longer, staring past me at the house, the barn, the line of trees. Then he climbed into the truck. As their vehicle pulled away down the road, the rumble faded into distance, replaced by the familiar quiet of the ranch. Only this time the quiet didn't feel like emptiness. It felt like a line drawn. I stood at the gate long after their truck disappeared around the bend, the cold biting at my fingers, my breath still unsteady. The snow beneath my boots was packed hard, the earth frozen just like the silence that settled in the wake of my father's retreat. Sheriff Walt stayed beside me, hands in his coat pockets, watching the road as if expecting them to return. "They'll be back," he said after a moment. "People who feel entitled don't usually quit after one try, but now they know this isn't a soft target." I nodded, though a knot tightened in my stomach. I just never thought they'd go this far. Walt gave me a sympathetic look. "You'd be surprised what folks do when pride mixes with desperation." He paused. "And promises." The word promises hung in the air. Evan had lived his entire life on promises my father made and rarely kept. That pattern had protected him and destroyed him all at once. Rachel stepped closer. "You handled yourself well today," she said. "Better than most civilians would. Better than many service members, frankly." "I didn't feel calm," I admitted. "That's usually how you know you were." She looked toward the tree line. "But this isn't over. They came with intent to unlawfully enter. That's serious." Walt nodded. "I'll file a formal trespass incident. Paper trail's important. If they try this again, I'll have authority to act quickly." "Thank you," I said. "I'm not doing it for you," Walt said with a faint grin. "I'm doing it because I like the peace around here and your family seems allergic to it." That almost made me laugh. Rachel, though, had her lawyer face back on. "Olivia, if they pursue any claim, however baseless, I'll help you respond. But I'd wager they're too embarrassed to try." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe this insane chapter of my life was closing. But deep down, I knew better. My father wasn't the type to lick his wounds and walk away. He was the type to reload and try again. 2 days passed before the next contact. I was repairing a loose board in the barn when my phone buzzed. A text from Linda. Not Dad, not Evan. "Can we please talk? It's urgent." I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. I chose not to. 10 minutes later, my phone rang, Dad's number. I let it go to voicemail. A second call, then a third. When the fourth came, I answered out of pure exhaustion. "Olivia," Dad said immediately, "you need to stop whatever legal action you're taking against us." "I haven't taken any legal action, Dad." "Well, Sheriff Hensley filed something." "He filed a trespass report," I said calmly. "Because you trespassed." Dad huffed angrily. "This is unnecessary, completely unnecessary. We just want to talk." "You wanted to talk," I replied. "You should have called before bringing a locksmith to my gate." "That locksmith came on his own," Dad lied. I laughed softly. "Dad, the entire interaction is on video." Silence. Then he barreled forward. "Fine. We made a mistake. But Evan is in trouble. Real trouble. He needs a place. And he believes rightfully that this land should have been his shot at a fresh start." "And what about my fresh start?" I asked quietly. "Why is yours and Evan's happiness always something I'm expected to sacrifice for?" More silence. Then, in a voice rougher than before, he said, "Because you can handle things. He can't." Ah, the old truth, the unspoken rule of our family. I was the dependable one. Evan was the fragile one. Therefore, it was my job to bend. "Dad," I said gently, "you raised us both. If Evan can't handle life, that's not on me. And stealing my property isn't a solution." "It wasn't stealing. It was," I interrupted, "and it still is." His voice broke into frustration again. "You're being dramatic. Families solve things together." "Do they?" I said. "Because last time I checked, you solved Christmas by cutting me out." He inhaled sharply. "We already explained that." "No," I said. "You never explained it. You just hoped I'd pretend it didn't happen." The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped lower. "Fine. Come over. Let's talk face to face." "I'm not driving 2 hours for another ambush," I said. If you have something to say it now." I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. "We want you to transfer the property into all of our names just temporarily until Evan gets situated." A colder silence settled between us. "No," I said. Dad exploded. "This is selfish. This is cruel. We're trying to help your brother and you're acting like some sort of—" Click. I ended the call. For the first time in years, I felt no guilt. That night, the snow returned, big flakes drifting like feathers from the sky. I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the quiet world soften. The ranch looked peaceful again. But my phone buzzed, breaking the calm. A voicemail from Linda. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her voice was shaky. "Olivia, your dad's not telling the truth. Evan is in deeper trouble than you know. His debt, his drinking, the people he owes money to. They pressured your father. He thought if Evan got the land, he could use it as collateral. Your dad made promises he couldn't keep. He's embarrassed, but he's scared too." She sniffled. "None of this excuses what they did, but I thought you should know." I sat there motionless, mug cooling in my hands. Debt, pressure, collateral, a son drowning, a father making desperate, stupid choices, and a daughter who'd already spent a decade being everyone's life raft. I wasn't angry in that moment, I was tired. So tired. The next morning I met with Walt at the station to finalize the trespass report. He read through the transcript of my recordings, highlighting certain parts. "Your dad doesn't understand the corner he's putting himself in," he said. "If he keeps this up, he'll face real consequences." "I don't want him arrested," I said quietly. "I know," Walt replied, "but sometimes the law is the only thing stubborn people respect." He signed the report and handed me a copy. "You're safe now. They can't touch your land." But I wasn't thinking about the land. I was thinking about the boy Evan used to be, the one who asked me to read him stories at night. The one who made me a macaroni necklace in 2nd grade and said I was his best sister. The boy who got lost somewhere along the way. And the father who lost himself too. "Walt," I said softly, "if they come back, what happens then?" He gave me a steady, reassuring look. "Then we handle it. Together." I exhaled slowly. The storm hadn't passed, not yet. But something inside me was shifting, settling. This wasn't just about ownership of land anymore. It was about ownership of my life, my boundaries, my future. A future I would defend. A future I finally believed I deserved. The days after filing the trespass report were strangely quiet, too quiet. I'd gotten used to checking my cameras, glancing at the road every time headlights flashed, waiting for the next confrontation. But nothing happened. No calls, no trucks, no locksmiths. Just winter settling deeper into the ranch, coating the fence posts in ice and heavy white snow. I allowed myself a small breath of relief. But healing rarely comes in silence. It comes when someone finally gathers the courage to speak. That moment arrived a week later. I was repairing a loose hinge on the barn door when I heard tires crunching on snow. My chest tightened. I wiped my gloves on my jeans and stepped out into the pale afternoon sun. It wasn't Dad's truck. It was Evan's. He got out slowly, hands shoved into the pockets of a jacket that looked one size too large for him, borrowed probably. He didn't slam the door, didn't stride toward me with false confidence. He just stood there staring at the ground, letting out a long cloud of frozen breath. "Hey, Liv," he said softly. "Not Olivia, not you stole my land, just hey." "Hey," I said, equally cautious. "Does Dad know you're here?" He shook his head. "No, he'd be mad I came alone." "That's probably a good sign," I said. A faint smile twitched at the corner of his mouth before fading again. He kicked at a chunk of ice near his boot. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Without the sheriff, without your lawyer, just us." I studied him carefully. He wasn't defensive or angry. He looked older, somehow tired, defeated, and afraid of the space between us. It softened something in me I didn't know was still capable of softening. "Yeah," I said, "we can talk." We walked toward the porch and sat on the top step. The boards creaked under our weight, and the cold air nipped at our ears. Evan rubbed his hands together, inhaled deeply, and said, "I messed up." I didn't rush him. I didn't rescue him with words. I just let him speak. He kept his eyes on the snow. "I did try to buy this place, I really did. When the developer talked about building cabins up here, I thought, maybe I could run one. Or help manage the rentals. Something stable, something real. He swallowed. But the loan fell apart. My credit's terrible. I didn't tell Dad. I just kept saying everything was fine because, well, I didn't want to disappoint him again. My throat tightened. Evan? He shook his head. Let me get this out. His breath shook a little. When you bought it, I freaked out. Not because I thought you were trying to steal something. I just saw the last thing I'd been hanging on to vanish. And Dad? He let out a humorless laugh. Dad told me it was yours to give me. That you'd do the right thing, like you always do. Meaning, I said quietly, he expected me to sacrifice again. Evan nodded miserably. And I let him, because it was easier than admitting I'd failed. Again. A long silence stretched between us, filled only by the soft rustling of wind through bare branches. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry, Liv, for all of it. The yelling at the gate, the locksmith, the accusations. You didn't deserve any of that. I blinked back an unexpected sting of tears. I had prepared for war, not apology. I appreciate you saying that, I said softly. Really? He looked up, eyes red at the edges. I don't expect you to forgive us overnight. I just didn't want you thinking I hated you. I don't. I never did. He hesitated. I was jealous. You went out into the world. You made something of yourself. You survived things I couldn't imagine. Dad always acted like you didn't do enough, but to me you were always doing too much. Too strong, too steady. It made me feel small. His honesty hit harder than his anger ever had. I exhaled slowly. Evan. I spent years trying to carry this family, trying to be strong enough for everyone, and I think I forgot that being strong doesn't mean letting people walk over me. Yeah, he wiped his nose with his sleeve. I get that now. We sat there until the sun touched the tops of the pines and turned the snow a pale gold. Finally, I said, if you want a fresh start, I'll help you, but not by giving away my land, not by letting Dad make choices for me. We do it the right way. The right way, he echoed softly. I'd like that. He stood, hesitated, then pulled me into a quick, awkward hug, one he needed more than I did. When he drove away, I watched until his truck disappeared behind the ridge. The tension in my chest loosened for the first time since Christmas Eve. Dad was slower to come around. Pride doesn't thaw easily. But about a month later, after the snow melted into muddy rivulets across the property, he showed up, no locksmith, no realtor, no entourage. Just him. A man who suddenly looked older, smaller, unsure. I didn't invite him inside. We stood on the porch, two stubborn Carters finally forced to face the truth. I did wrong by you, he said without preamble. By both of you. I thought I was helping Evan survive, but all I was doing was teaching him someone would always fix his mistakes. I crossed my arms. And what were you teaching me? He flinched. That you didn't matter as much. That your strength meant you didn't need anything. I see now how bad that was. I see a lot of things now. He shifted, clearing his throat. Linda's been pushing for counseling. I'm going. That took me aback, my father counseling. He let out a breath. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like a chance at whatever relationship you're willing to have. I studied him, the man who raised me imperfectly, who hurt me deeply, but who was finally stepping toward reconciliation instead of away from it. Boundaries, I said simply. That's what I need. He nodded. I can do that. And for the first time in years, I believed him. Spring came. Snow gave way to green. The ranch felt less like a fortress and more like a home. Evan visited, sometimes helping repair the barn roof or clear fallen branches. Dad called before dropping by. Linda sent homemade bread. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't a movie ending. But it was real. On Easter Sunday, I hosted a small dinner at the ranch. Nothing fancy, ham, potatoes, and a pie that Rachel joked was 90% crust, 10% filling. We sat around the table, awkward at first, then easier. And for the first time I felt something warm settle inside me, not triumph, not revenge. Peace. As I watched the sun set over my land that evening, painting the fields in shades of gold and pink, I realized something. Family doesn't heal all at once. It heals in steps, in apologies, in boundaries respected, not ignored, in choosing to do better than the day before. This ranch had started as an escape and act of defiance, but it became something more. A place where I learned that protecting myself didn't mean closing the door forever. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. And reconciliation didn't require surrender, it required honesty. If you're listening to this wherever you are, I hope you remember one thing. You are allowed to draw a line, you are allowed to protect your peace, and you are allowed to let people back in only when they earn it. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need it today. Tell me where you're listening from, and know you're welcome at my table anytime. 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 Anytime.